Carol Haigh. I'm the Professor of Nursing here at MMU. I'm also the editor on the Journal of Clinical Nursing, which is one of the world's largest nursing journals. And I've been writing and publishing in academic journals since about 1985, so I've got quite a lot of experience in that field. It's really important to format properly when you're submitting something for publication. Nothing will annoy a submitting editor more than a paper that is not in the in-house style or uses the wrong type of referencing. Some journals, for example, use Vancouver referencing, which is when you have the little numbers in text. Other journals, like my journal, use Harvard, which is when you just have an alphabetized list at the end of the paper. And so if you submit a paper that isn't formatted appropriately, the first thing it says to an editor is, A, we weren't your first choice, and B, you haven't looked at our author guidelines. And that level of academic rigour has to be carried over from your thesis to anything you publish if you're going to stand the slightest chance of getting it even through to review. And it's hard enough to get a paper accepted as it is. I mean, nursing journals are running at something like an 80% rejection rate at the moment because we've got so many papers being submitted. And if you've got something really good, you don't want to fall at the first hurdle. You don't want to make it harder for yourself. I mentioned house style, and that's really important. Certain journals like papers to be written in specific ways. It's almost like learning a new language, knowing the code that they want you to use when you're submitting your paper. So it's no good submitting a terribly scientifically written paper to a journal that routinely uses qualitative data, for example, because the style in which you write and the way in which you present your results and the way in which you talk about your analysis and discussion will be completely at odds with what the readership of the journal are looking for. And that's really a good point, because if you're submitting for publication, ideally you know which journal you're going for before you even start to put your paper together, because if you don't, you can't write to the house style. It's also a very good idea to look at the journal content and see the sorts of paper they publish, see the style in which they're written, and try to align yourself to that while still maintaining your own author type credibility and integrity. Yeah, there's definitely some tips that will get your paper looked at more favourably, and the most important one is actually look at what the journal publishes and the type of papers that they publish. So taking a look at the content of the most recent journal online will give you a feel for the way they want your paper written. I would always suggest as well that you have a list. So my theory is get rejected by the best and work your way down. So don't be frightened to put a paper into a high power journal. If they don't want it, at the very least you'll get some excellent feedback from the reviewers, and that will make it a stronger paper when you move down to the second journal on your list. And I think also it's important that you actually look at the content of what you're writing. A lot of people cut and paste from their thesis, and nothing will put a journal editor off quicker than if a submission starts, the purpose of this thesis is to discuss X, Y, Z, because it's very obvious that the author hasn't actually thought through what they're doing and they've just done a sloppy cut and paste job. And that's the quickest way to get yourself onto the reject pile. I'd also suggest as well, if English isn't your first language, you get your paper reviewed by somebody, either by an editing service, which some journals offer, or by someone for whom English is a first language, because again, if the English is difficult to understand, that's usually an automatic reject from a journal. It's also really important that you look at the author submission guidelines. They're very often hard to find. They're hidden somewhere on the journal website, but every journal will have a copy of those. And that will also tell you what they're expecting, what word limits they're expecting. If 5,000 words is the word limit, submitting a paper of 8,000 words will be an automatic reject. So although it's hard work to find them, and they're sometimes very long and appear quite tedious to read, they are important if you want your paper looked at properly.